And hello, hi, I'm Bob Boross, and this is my Jazz and Tap Dance Life. This is my YouTube channel where we discuss all things about jazz and tap dance. Many things I have on my website, or my YouTube channel, I should say, are historical videos, instructional videos, opinion videos. There's lots and lots of information there. One big thing I've been doing right now is a live interview series with people who are very important in jazz dance, who are creating new things, bringing out new ideas. And we have probably like one of my strongest interviews today. There's a new documentary about the history of jazz dance called Uprooted, The Journey of Jazz Dance, which actually has its premiere this Sunday as part of the Dance on Camera Film Festival at Lincoln Center. And I have the three creative heads of this new documentary who are going to be with us here today, and they are going to discuss what it's about, what they intend to bring out, and what they hope to do with the information that's going to come out about jazz dance. I think it's going to be sort of a groundbreaking production that we're going to be looking at for quite a while. So let me pull these people in, right? They're waiting in the wings. All right. Hello, this is Khadifa Wong.
Hello. Hi.
And she is the director, and this is Lisa Donmall-Reeve.
Hi.
She's producing. She's in sunny California, as you can see. And I will add Zak. Hello, Zak Nemorin.
Hi, how are you?
And Zak is credited with the original concept and also provided a lot of the choreography that you'll see in the documentary too. So thank you all for making time to come here. I know you're all like on different continents and all over the place, but we're going to make this work as best as we can. All right. I'm Cece here. Hi, Rachel, and Joelle is here from France too. So we have some people checking in already. Okay. Now, before we get into the actual documentary and start talking about that, why don't like each of you just talk a little bit about like what is, briefly, what is your jazz dance history? What are the things that you knew about jazz dance? What makes you a jazz dancer from your past history? Khadifa, you want to start with that, please?
Sure. I don't think I ever called myself a jazz dancer, strangely enough. I came from a contemporary background to start with, but I studied jazz as part of my time at London Studio Centre. And so just studied isolation technique was the only real grounding I had, with a bit of what we used to call street dance at the time. And that was it. But I had very, very little jazz dance training until I sort of met Zak and learned from him what it was really all about. And he is the one that ignited my kind of excitement for it.
Okay, great. Okay. Lisa.
Okay, so I started dancing from a very young age. I would say I probably was improvising without knowing. I was improvising from like 4 or 5, just dancing in front of my only one that would watch when the music was on. I then obviously got into class and did ISTD. So in England you get an ISTD, which I guess they call, it's not really called jazz, but it's called modern, but it was like the basics modern. By the time I was 11, I knew that's what I wanted to do, because I was watching musicals in the West End and really was just like hooked. And then I went to London Studio Centre when I was 16 until 19. And that's where I was immersed in this. That's where I then found mathematics, because they did mathematics and a wealth of other jazz styles and modern and everything. It was like heaven for me at that age. But I have to say, then I went into musical theatre like for decades as a career, but which I don't do anymore. I like transitioned obviously to filmmaking and producing, but it's throughout this documentary and the research involved that has made me, it's probably after my training at London Studio Centre that I then discovered more people and started to dig into the roots. But it was this documentary that really educated me as we went. And that's part of the reason why it's been a thrilling ride.
Okay. Zak.
So in a way, I'm kind of the opposite to Lisa. I started really late. So I was about 16 when I started, and but I had always loved MGM musicals, and had been to see many West End shows. Then I went to the Brit School, and then I went to London Studio Centre for 1 year, where I discovered mathematics as well. But I defected and went to Millennium Performing Arts and followed my mentor, Jackie Mitchell, who you actually taught at the same college at one point, and then had a almost 20-year-long career in West End shows so far, and now I'm a teacher as well, so I educate.
Okay, so you've all had, each of you mentioned this connection to the mathematics training, and Matt, many people might not realize, he was an American. He's one of the top advocates of jazz dance we should say jazz dance, because he called his work freestyle, but still was in the field of jazz dance in America. But in 1970, he left. He spent 5 years in London, and then after that went to Paris, and then stayed in France until he passed away a few years ago. So his presence in London, I think, brought a lot of new ideas maybe about what was possible with jazz and theater. So you guys seem to be coming from that is what your basis. But maybe you didn't have this idea of really, where did jazz dance come from? Where did it start? What were the founding roots, and how did it develop? You just like jump into today, but we really don't know the history. So maybe that's part of what the documentary is about. So Khadifa, can you give me maybe a quick explanation of like the topic and the scope of the documentary? What is it you're trying to do with this big ball of work that you've come up with?
Sure. I think we tried to do the impossible, which was try and get an overall picture of what jazz dance is, because what was abundantly clear when we started to do the research was how there's so much of a discourse within the jazz dance world as to the history, and how so much of it has been omitted from teaching. So even as someone who prided themselves, I did a degree in dance and thought I had a really good, thorough grounding in dance education, was shocked at just what I didn't know. And what I didn't know far outweighed what I did know. And so we kind of try to redress some balances, but we also realize that now some people don't even know what we were taught, and that's been lost as well, because people like dancing, they don't necessarily like the academic side. So it's trying to make sure that we have a thorough grounding in as many facets of the jazz world as possible, but making sure the uncovered history, the history that has been forgotten, is there as well. So it was a huge undertaking, and maybe we wouldn't have done that if we'd known just how difficult it was going to be. But I'm glad that we did. And what was nice was the book by Lindsay Guarino and Wendy Oliver was, for us, kind of had done a large part of that work. They'd started that conversation already by publishing that book. So we had somewhere to start. And that's what kind of interested me the most, was there is this kind of controversy, this conversation that is starting to happen, and that for me was the most enticing part of how we can bring that onto film. You always need a hook, and that was my hook. So yeah, we managed to try. We tried, and we didn't get it all. 90 minutes is not enough to cram 400 plus years of history, but we tried.
Yeah. So Lisa, you're the overall umbrella of this whole thing. You're the producer. So let's get to the plug. Where can people see this right now? Where's this coming out?
So right now it's just on Sunday. It's part of is its world premiere, but that's the film festival world premiere for Dance on Camera, which would have been at the Lincoln Center. So it's virtual. So actually that opens it up to more of America. We geo-blocked it to America because of this is like just the beginning of its film festival kind of tour, as it were, and you want to kind of protect, if it's because everything's virtual because of the pandemic. Normally you'd have to get to New York, buy a ticket, and when they're full, you either see it or you don't. So that's where we're at. At the same time, obviously we'll start talking to distributors and planning like the domestic release and the international releases, which will be at some point next year.
Okay, well, what we can see now is the trailer that you have. Actually, there's two trailers, but I'm going to try to pull up one of those trailers right now. It takes me a few clicks to make this happen, so just bear with me as I click away. And this should be sharing a screen for you. And I'm going to go live here. Okay.
A great jazz dancer has a strong sense of smell. A great jazz dancer is jazz is an opportunity for everyone to bring their own culture, their own style. It's really what they feel in their heart and their soul.
A great jazz dancer knows how to focus, how to get the audience to look at them and say, this is what I want you to look at.
It's like the great jazz musicians. There are a lot of people that can hit the notes, but can they put it together? Can they make gumbo with it? Can they shush it? You know, that's jazz dancing.
Okay, so that's our trailer. Hold on, I'm coming back. Yeah, let me pop off of there. Okay. All right, Zak. If you, I mean, I've been knowledgeable in this documentary, and even had a little bit of film taken of me while I was teaching. And but I remember from the beginning of this project, it was called Transmissions, or that word Transmissions was in the title. And now that it's out, there's a new title called Uprooted. So maybe can you talk a little bit about that? Obviously, there was maybe a change in thinking, or something came to everyone's mind. Why did this change from Transmission to Uprooted?
Well, I was doing a degree at the time when we came up with this concept, and it was to do with this subject matter. And I was reading the jazz dance book by our lovely ladies, and there was a brilliant quote in there just about the differences between appropriation, migration, and the slipperiness in between that could be called or could be named transmission. So that was kind of the premise to begin with, because I do strongly believe that, you know, as the decades go on, as time goes on, we do transmit from each other, and we do take on and slowly migrate into different kind of like forms, different styles, we take on each other's cultures, and I think that's a beautiful thing. It was probably wise to change the name from Transmission, obviously, because as part of COVID as well. I mean, you know, that's a transmission of diseases as well. That could be seen in a negative light. But Uprooted just felt right, especially in this climate that we find ourselves in today, and especially as it's so to do with jazz dance. Jazz dance is uprooted from the motherland, or from different cultures, or from different areas. So I think that was a poignant moment where we just discovered a new name. Right. And Khadifa could probably actually say a little bit more about that than I.
Well, it was more when we got into the editing suite. I remember, I'll never forget the face of one of the editors that owned the editing house that we went in, and he said, "Oh, have you changed the title yet?" And we were like, maybe, no, we're happy with Transmission. And it was, his face was just like, really? You're happy with that? And we were like, oh, maybe, because they're non-dancers. So for them, they didn't understand it. Dancers understood it and thought it was a good title. But we realized if we wanted to kind of catch a non-dance audience as well, it had to be a title that, you know, they could kind of easily identify with. So there was that reason too. And so we just felt that Transmission, just as much as it resonated with dancers, it didn't resonate at all with non-dancers, and non-dancers now would associate with, I think, with something completely different. So it was I think it was a good decision to change it. It took us a while to find the new name, but as Zak says, it feels right. So we're happy with it now, and it seems to work.
Okay, I'm going to make a quick detour here because we have a question. And Lisa, this is going to be for you. Misty wants to know, for all those in higher ed, how are we able to access this for our students? Is this something that's going to be available to students, or not till the distant future?
If they want to watch it on Sunday, or 72 hours after 7 p.m. Eastern on Sunday, then they can watch it, Dance on Camera, the ticket link. Moving forward, obviously, we're still in talks with distributors. So that'll be, if they wanted to then have it as an educational thing, that'll be kind of something that's coming at some point next year.
Okay. All right. We all know that jazz.
But we'll be
dance
also announcing other festivals. So yeah, but they might have a chance later on, but we can't announce anything yet.
It's all secret. Okay. Jazz dance is a vast subject. There are so many different aspects to it, so many ways to study it. And as you said, you have hopefully 90 minutes to do this. So like, how did you look at this whole entire ball and set up your plan or your outline to say, this is how we're going to attack this problem? How did you look at that and decide what to do with it?
We did it on a timeline. So when we got into the edit suite, well, during filming, what was nice was we let it grow organically. So we didn't attach any kind of limitations during filming. You know, we filmed in particular locations, so we were limited in say, well, this is who we'll speak to in London, this is who we're going to speak to in New York and LA and so on. And whenever anyone recommended someone, we would look. It's like, I think after about the 7th or 8th person that was to do with Fosse, we were like, look, no more Fosse people. But really everybody kind of, you know, suggested people that they thought had something to say, and that's what we wanted. So once we had collected those interviews, and I think we had about, was it nine, how many interviews did we end up having? 70?
70, yeah.
Something.
70 something, yeah.
When we got into the edit suite, myself and the editor, Zak Nemorin, just set up a timeline of sort of from sort of when the 1619, when the first slave ship landed, to present day. And then we just kind of put where the shows were, the significant sort of moments in dance history, and just kind of then developed it from there and laid everything up in a linear timeline. And then Joan did her magic with working out how best the story told it on film. So we do go back and forth, but we do tend to stick throughout that 90 minutes from a linear thing. So we start just before the slave ships arrived in Africa and end up in the modern day and say, well, where are we now? But we did divert during the film for little moments in time with little kind of idents and things like that. But that was I think the only way we could have really kind of wrapped our head around it was to put it in a linear context from beginning to end.
Okay. Are there any things that you felt that you had to leave out that you wish you could have put in?
Hundreds of things.
So much.
So much. Some people are just literally, it's things like in tap dance, you know, we've got, I can't remember his name because it's escaped me, but the stair dance is a really iconic moment in tap dance. And we were like, well, we can't, we can't do that in detail. So we just had to show it because we found some visuals. So it's little things like that you're like, all of these deserve, you know, 10, 20 minutes of discussion. But we didn't have time for a lot of them. So there's so much we left out. But there's also the beauty of film is you can also distill something into a very short amount of time because you have the visual cues and the ability to do that. So just by showing a moment I think we spend 2 minutes in the Savoy Ballroom, but within those 2 minutes, by cutting all of those shots, you can show so many people. We just can't do features on them and talk about how great they were, but they are there. And then we can then encourage dancers to go off and look at every single person that came from that and go, right, now you have to do your research. So yeah, there's loads that I wish is in there, but 90 minutes.
I'm sure. Well, since you had yourselves wrapped around the subject so intently for so many years now, you must be like very experts on the subject. And I'm going to hit you with this. There's this age-old question that I don't know. Anytime I'm on a panel, somebody raises their hand and they ask a question. So, I mean, do you have an idea, a definition? What is jazz dance? If somebody says to you, "What is jazz dance?" What would you say right back to them?
Zach?
Go on.
Can I go? I would always, whenever I teach my students or anybody, or whenever I choreograph anything in the jazz dance way, I would always use the words rhythm, syncopation, dynamics, isolation, improvisation, and if it don't mean a thing, it ain't got that swing. So it needs to be grounded, and it needs to be into the earth, into Mother Earth. So on a kind of like skin deep level, in that is my way of explaining what jazz is, the aesthetics of what jazz is. But then I would also kind of broaden that and say it's an African-esque aesthetic. So it has to have and pay homage and hark back to its roots. So that would be my definition of what jazz is. I know, Khadifa, you were just about to say something.
No, I was just going to say that I turn it back onto the person who asks the question and say, well, what do you talking about, because there's different forms of jazz dance. If you're asking me what certain people did, I'll say, well, that's this type of jazz dance, and you can break it down. But I think where we're at now is we need to have this discussion on how we define jazz dance, because that's part of, I think, the problem with its identity is you can name it different, you know, people can identify it in different ways, but is that always correct? And are you paying homage to where it came from in that identification? And I'm not sure we always do, but I think what's brilliant is that we're going to have that conversation now, and hopefully we'll come to a more kind of concentrated definition of it. But I like when someone, Kimberly from Decidedly Jazz Dance Work says, you know what jazz dance is, when you see it, you see it. And I go with that one. I cop out and just say that.
Well, I mean, and that begs the question too. You're saying when you see it, you know it, but that also means, but in your mind, you have an idea of what you know. And unfortunately, I mean, this is kind of my pet thing that I just say a lot, is that there are a lot of people out there talking about jazz dance who don't know anything about it, particularly some of these televised dance shows who are always calling something jazz. And I look at it, I'm like, I don't see any of those aspects in this, but yet the name is put out there. So the perception of what jazz is, or what the roots are, or what the characteristics are, is not in the mindset of a lot of the general public, or even of the dancing public who are actually dancing that. And that's a question. I'm going to jump a little bit forward here. This is, you know, something that was formed on the American continent, you know, and is something from our history that then went out to across the world. But yet we have the three of you who are from Great Britain who are making this documentary. And so my question was, why are you making this? Why isn't somebody from America? Or why hasn't someone from America made this video?
Flip that back.
Well, technically, I am in America.
Okay.
I've got dual citizens. I'm apparently American. Just saying.
I would actually flip that back actually, and say the question, not to block your question, but why? Why did an American not do it? Like, I would ask that question right back. Yeah. I think as British people, it could be said that we have less bias, and as documentarians, we can view and accept many people's different views and many people's different perceptions of what jazz is, and document all of those many different kind of like areas. Whereas, who knows? Don't shoot me, but who knows? Maybe an American person or an American team might have more bias towards a particular set. I'd move my arms and hands a lot, I know, but yeah, maybe we can take a step back from the actual kind of thing and just kind of look at it and then kind of document it.
I think it's important to note that, you know, American companies and production companies have done documentaries on subsets of jazz dance. And therein lies the problem, that they tend to follow a very established path, a lot of these films. So if they focus on, say, the golden era of Hollywood, they'll give you Singing in the Rain and all these wonderful pieces of work, but won't tell you that at the time when a lot of these films were coming out, there was the civil rights movement, there was segregation, there was all of these ugly sides of things that you don't always want to put forth. And so, not being American, being British, and we see that, we can see that kind of side of it and put it into the context. So I think I decided personally, my motivation for making the film was, well, I'm only seeing one side of the story and I need to see the other. And that's what I wasn't getting. And that's the same in British history as well. We're now having this wonderful kind of dialogue about our history and suddenly realizing the British Empire, although we've been telling them for ages the British Empire wasn't a great thing, now a lot of British people are realizing, oh yeah, we really did rape and pillage a load of countries around the world, and we weren't, you know, it wasn't an outreach education program like we like to tell people. So, so there is that. So I think, you know, that can be maybe said that that's why we were brave or stupid enough to take on the whole of it. But yeah, I don't know why it hasn't been taken up by an American kind of dance force. I think now, though, what's going to happen is we will get that. And I think what will be even better is people will do subsets and do more little nuggets of the jazz tree, little branches, and expand on them. So we'll get a much more rounded kind kind of education and curriculum on film, which is great. So our film that kind of encompasses all is just the starter, and it will just hopefully kick a lot of conversations outwards and for it to happen.
Yeah.
And just on the back of that, I mean, I've been living in the States for 8.5 years, and Zak and Khadifa came to me and kind of said, would you be interested? And so that's why, for me, it's about the project. I didn't even go, oh, we can't do that. It's an American story. It's, I like, am I connected to what we're about to make? And let's do the whole thing. I don't even think about, oh, I'm British, I can't do that, because I think that's too, I don't think you should ever.
We didn't think, oh, because we're British, that we
I just was like, oh yeah, I know jazz dance, I love documentaries, let's do it. Like literally that was my this is gonna be awesome. Let's do the whole thing.
Well, I think the idea that I'm coming from is that there is a lack of curiosity in America and American dancing, and young people who are studying about jazz dance. There's just not a natural curiosity about it. They sort of take what's given to them, they take the top of it, they take the sizzle of it, but to look deeper and say, where did this come from? You know, and there's a lot of uglier things that are part of the history, and to say, oh, that's what I'm thinking of when I go to take my jazz dance class, you know, at my local dance studio, and we swing our hips, that sort of thing. So there's been a lot of just taking the gloss of jazz dance and not really looking at where did this come from. And I'll know from me, I'll have kids, you know, when I teach quite a bit in universities, and I'll just say, you know, someone who's been dancing for 10, 12 years, and I'll say, you know, well, do you know where jazz dance came from? And a lot of the answers are Bob Fosse, but a lot are just, I don't know. And then when I talk about the African roots and how this came together, they're like, really? Wow. You know, so like, this is your own history, and they're not curious about it, as opposed to like a particular one time teaching in St. Petersburg in Russia. And I did a jazz dance history lecture at the Urartu Museum. And there were all these jazz musicians who came because they wanted to know about jazz dancing and how it related to music. And these Russian people were so interested in every little detail. In 1942, when this happened and this song came out, and I'm like, you guys ask way more detailed questions than I would ever get in America. So, you know, for some reason, maybe we just take it for granted, and we only take the good stuff. The happy
it's not a uniquely American thing, because one of the main events, the catalyst for Zak and I was, do you remember when we were in that staff room, Zak? And one of the kids, a teacher came in and was just livid because he'd asked kids to kind of give him some Fred Astaire zhuzh, and he got blank faces. And he went ballistic and was saying, how did he, what, Fred Astaire, like, wait, what? And we were sort of, you know, got on our high horse, like, how come kids don't know the history, what's going on? And that was one of our earliest conversations about this film, was how do we find a way to bring this history and not just sort of lecture them or yell and shove it down their throats? And we sort of thought, oh, film, you know, because they can't see how they're influenced by those things. They couldn't see how Fred Astaire now influenced what they were doing, and so on, you know, and it's not just Fred Astaire, but that was the one example at the time in that class that the kids just went, don't know who that is, mate. Like, exactly. You know, so it's not just, I don't think it's just an American thing. I think it's a Western thing. I think we just don't have an appreciation of our history or how it leads us to where we are. We're very much what's in the now. Taught. Yes, and how it's been taught. Yeah.
And what's being taught and how it's being taught. And you don't know that as a child. And as a child, that I was just, oh, I'm a dancer, I want to be the best, I'll do as I'm told. I was taught some Lindy and taught some African dance, but they never gave me any context and any history. And I was in that situation where you just do as you're told, and I'm really lucky to be here. So I'm responsible as well. I didn't ask any questions because I didn't feel like I could, but we should have been given that information. So Tom Ralabat said, you know, you should be sprinkling this information. And that's, when I do teach now, that's something that I've really taken on board to add in. So everyone's kind of responsible to get everyone more curious. And we're hoping that this film does make, the new generation or the current dancing generation a bit more curious, but I do think it's within the system.
Okay. Well, would you think that, you know, because one of the questions I had was like, what are the groundbreaking ideas that you've come up with through your research, you know, that you're going to bring out in this documentary? And I was wondering, I mean, certainly you have all ideas about jazz dance, but the idea about how jazz dance has been written down, recorded, transmitted, talked about, maybe that's even a bigger idea and a bigger aspect than the jazz dance itself, because that seems to be a very strong part of what your documentary is about. This representation.
I think that was for me the kind of, it's not just a dance film, it's also a social and political film. And it just sort of, on a bigger picture, it shows how a lot of, say, African-American creativity and what African-Americans have brought to this country, then it's not attributed. And so you can use jazz dance as an example for how America, how Britain have operated as societies. And that's why we're having the unrest that we're having now, is because it's beginning to, the kids that were promised hope and change in my generation especially grew up thinking, well, we're not the civil rights movement. We're past that. We're supposed to be getting equality. But 42 years later, I'm not seeing that. So that was my way of having a voice of saying, look, I still think this is an unjust system, but this is how my system I was raised in was the dance system. And so this is what you took away from me, was my connection to that lineage, because I was taught that ballet was the way. And so I wasn't taught to value the African dance other than by my parents, but you don't listen to your parents. So I wanted what my dance teachers were telling me, that's what I wanted as a kid. I wanted to impress these people. I wanted to succeed, but I didn't have turnout. But that doesn't mean that I couldn't be. And that's why I found a home in the contemporary world, because our contemporary dance teachers were not about that. They were about what you brought to the table, which ironically is the more jazzy. And the jazz that I was taught was about being sexy, was about having, long hair and flicking it and doing hairography. It wasn't about the essence of jazz dance. So I was, taught to be myself, to improvise in the contemporary world. And that was the how I was able to connect. So, yeah, I think that was for me the hook of the film. Yeah.
Great. Well, all right. So that's, that's a serious aspect that you're bringing out, but maybe something on a little bit more personal connection to there. I mean, like you said, you interviewed over 70 people, or close to 70 different people and luminaries in jazz dance and other areas too. So maybe you have like one particular person who really spoke to you or brought out something interesting or unique. Maybe there's something you could say, look, this is what this person said, and this is why it really is sticking with me now and why it's important.
There are so many.
I don't think I can say I had a favorite or a kind of a light bulb moment, because every single interview, and I would say I probably interviewed about 75% of the people, and Khadifa did about 25%. Every single person had a nugget of gold that actually educated me and broadened my mind into how I go about choreography, or how I go about teaching, or how I go about my life. So I think every single person is special. Every single person has golden nuggets, which makes our film quite exciting, actually.
Yeah. I think personally for me, it was Monsell Durden, when he spoke about Black people who, wear the garb, have their natural hair, have to have the black art on the walls. But when it comes to the dance, they don't treat their own dance as, and even though that's the mostly tied to their culture. And I sat there and I think I felt about this big, because he was describing me. And I just sort of sank down in my chair and was like, oh my God, I'm always like talking about Black issues. But when I was a kid and it came to Black dance, I was very, very judgmental and, had that internalized bias and didn't realize it. And then sort of sat in that room and had that revelation that, oh my God, this has really affected me. It was amazing. So that changed my entire kind of perspective and outlook on my entire dance history, to have that, just sitting there, and then go and meet Debbie Allen straight after that and be like, oh my God.
Yeah.
It was just the most surreal day, where you were the two mirrors to your past, because Debbie Allen was why I started dancing in the first place. But to have been called out that you'd come so far from what you'd started was intense. Absolutely intense. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and when we were in the edit and you're looking at all this footage, and you know, you get Cheetah and Graziella on screen, and I mean that was a joy anyway. We filmed them after your class, Bob, and we were just, all we had to do was point the camera and be like, you just chat amongst yourselves, because they were just amazing. And some of the stuff they came out with, and then you kind of got Mandy Moore that was just so entertaining, Andy Blankenbuehler that just was like gold, Al Blackstone, Melanie George, we filmed twice, and she's just amazing.
She's so good.
Thomas de France, like, is just what I'm like, joy. There's just, you could just be like, I'll bore you to tears, but it's just, it was gold. We were incredibly lucky, so lucky, and obviously Debbie Allen's up there as well. Yeah. I don't want to miss anyone. You're all amazing.
Jazz dance, is seen in many different areas. So there's a social aspect, where just people dancing together to music in a social situation, and there's a theatrical aspect, which is what you were kind of describing before. You're doing shows for musical theater and public display, and then there's also a concert dance form, which is going to be a little bit more in terms of the creativity of the choreographer, or how that person is working, and may use aspects of jazz dance in many different ways. So it's not to totally represent jazz as it was, it's to use it in a creative aspect. So maybe you could talk a little bit about those as to whether, like, where is jazz most visible? Where is the strongest? Where does it have the most promise for the future? Where does it have range to be developed? You know, what are the possibilities between those three areas: social, theatrical, and the concert? What's going on in those areas?
I mean, jazz dance is everywhere. Jazz dance is everywhere because it is a cultural thing. Jazz dance, even if Al Blackstone says, even if people don't know that they're seeing jazz dance, they are actually, they love jazz dance. So jazz dance is on TV, it's in theatre, it's just everywhere, and people don't realise that it falls under the umbrella of jazz dance. So it could be said that we all are seeing jazz dance constantly, really, whether it be on TV or film.
I think it's lacking in the concert dance in the sense that we haven't got enough companies. The companies that we do have are fantastic, but we need more of them. And Drew McConey says, when you think about how saturated the world is with ballet companies, ballet dancers, when they graduate, they have options, they have career paths. They're like, well, we can go to this company, they can train. But as jazz dancers, that's what I found, and I know Zach, we mentioned this together, we were like, well, where do the jazz dancers go when they leave training? They do all these wonderful classes, but where do they go? Where's their company? They've got maybe 4 or 5 to choose from.
They go to musical theatre.
They go into the musicals to do the dance, but then they're doing, the same thing 8 shows a week, and that's not as stimulating as working with different choreographers. Where's the repertory? Where's all of these things? So I feel like there should be a few more of those companies out there, and that they need to fund the ones that we do have to allow them the freedom to kind of then go in and do the education and that, so they're not always kind of hoping to get the money and the investment, especially in America. With Decidedly Jazz Dance, we saw what's possible, and the way Canada was sort of helping them in the local Calgary government and what they're able to do in that beautiful building and the educational outreach, working with people with Alzheimer's and things. It's amazing. So the possibilities to extend it, we are seeing it. We just need more money and more attention.
Well, why aren't these companies getting money? I mean, I have my own ideas, but why aren't they getting money when they apply for a grant? Usually it's one entity that's giving the grant, and they have application for many different types of groups. Why aren't the jazz dancers being awarded support? I
don't know how many jazz dancers are on those boards, to be honest. If you look at in the UK, in the Arts Council, they give, I think, 0.04% of their budget to jazz. And when I say jazz, that's jazz music and jazz dance. That's jazz everything. But 25 million goes to the Opera House and the Royal Ballet. So who are the ones with the priority? It's all the lords and the ladies. They don't care about black dance or dance of black origin or community dance or dances from the streets. That's not what they think of as art. So we have to change their minds. And that's why it's the people that, as Salima Knight says, it falls in alignment with the people, the values fall in alignment with the people that have the dollars. So look at who's on those boards of funding. Are they jazzy people? Are they people that appreciate social dance? Do they appreciate the artistry of jazz dance? Do they appreciate the artistry of musical theatre, or do they turn their nose up at it? It's I think that's where we'll find it's wrong.
Yeah, I understand that too. And then, like I said earlier, there's a perception about jazz dance. When you say jazz to somebody maybe who doesn't know it or has a certain idea, somebody says, "What do you do, Bob?" And I said, "Well, I'm a jazz dance teacher." And they go, "Jazz hands." You know, that's their perception. Or, "Oh, I love Bob Fosse." So people have a perception. And I had written an article for a publication that was in France, which is now no longer in existence. It's called Jazz Pulsions. And in this, I was doing something about jazz in New York and talking to different people, and they were actually saying, for my company or my performances, I'm removing the name jazz from the title of my company because that gives a certain perception, and they are funding more contemporary. So, you know, they'll call it a different name, but actually be afraid to say the word jazz because of what people will think of you. And that's a big hindrance. That's a big stumbling block, I think, that a lot of people are dealing with today. So
I think it's the whole thing of deconstructing, isn't it? Is unpicking what people think they know and teaching them actually of what it actually is. You know, Chet Walker talks about how he was told he could have a grant if he put contemporary in the title, and he refused to do it. Because he was like, why would I do that? It's not contemporary. So, it was that. I mean, that's just, I won't say dumb, but dumb, you know. It's just really short-sighted. So
the irony is the money is there in jazz. Like, jazz generates money. If you think about how much Broadway and the West End makes, they do generate, you know, those dances do generate a hell of a lot of money, but the money just doesn't funnel down to the grassroots for some reason. So I think we need to look at that. And I think then again, if they fund schools and some of these, you know, we had an Andrew Lloyd Webber endowed studio at London Studio Centre. Well, that's good. So then London Studio Centre needs to sort of make an effort to teach the jazz in that way. So there's a disconnect somewhere, but it is there. There is money, I think, there, and there is the funds and the means in it, and the desire, especially the desire, is willing. It's there.
And this was one of the reasons why we decided to make the film in the first place, to raise the awareness, raise the knowledge, so that more companies could be in abundance, so that more companies could get money, so that the education is there to begin with, and so that we battle establishment a little bit. Oh, dare I say?
Well, that's actually one reason I started writing in the beginning of my academic career. Here in the United States, there was a newspaper sent out by a man named Owen Goldman. It was called Dancer. And it was just mailed to every dance studio in the country. And it had everything in it. This was not a juried sort of a thing. Anybody could get their press release in. So there was a column on ballet. There was a column on tap dance. There was nothing on jazz. And that's my field. And I'm in the university now. I have to write. So I said, can I write something, Owen? He says, sure. As long as you do it for free, I don't care. So for 2.5 years, I wrote articles and interviewed decidedly jazz dance work, Danny Burichesky, Billy Sigenfeld, so many people with the idea of at least these groups will have a full-page article that they can then send to their funders as supporting material to say, look, this national organization group is writing something about me. And that was really one of the reasons why I did that for 2.5 years. One weekend every month, I spent between Friday was the interview, Saturday was the reworking, Sunday was to make it as good as be, and then I sent it in on Sunday night. But like that's what needed to be done, because that's something I find. There's an idea like the big shots, the older big shots. If you got Matt Maddox, Gus Giordano, Luigi, people like that. Why are they so big? Why are they so dominant of the field even still? And I think that there was a lack of support from the dance media in particular, because they kept pushing those bigger shots. And I always said, who's the second tier after them? Who are they? I mean, Rick Owens for sure. I mean, this man should be just as big as anyone else. But yet, did he get press in the United States? So like there's something that where even the organizations of dance and the publications of dance didn't support the art form and sort of say, these are the new people coming up. This is the next group. And that's something that needs to change.
You just have to look at the Oxford Dictionary of Dance. I don't know if you've ever looked at it, and that upset me. Was jazz was like a paragraph and a half or something ridiculous for the whole thing, and that's the entry of it. And you're like looking for the names, and you're like, well, why are these people in it but not these people? And this is supposed to be the Oxford Dictionary of Dance, but it's 80% ballet and 60% ballet and 30% contemporary. But how much is it jazz? 5%? It's supposed to be encompassing all dance. And I get that you can't get every single bit of dance in there, but jazz deserved more than that. And it definitely deserves to be up, as equal as ballet and contemporary in my mind.
And of course it couldn't be. It couldn't be back in the day during the civil rights movement and before, because, it's an African-American art form in essence. And Black people didn't have any access to courts of law to codify anything. So that's going to be a huge reason why the second tier is not there.
Well, then what you've done now with this documentary, Uprooted, right, the journey of jazz dance, this is going to do a lot to provide a counterpoint to that, to provide a whole different stream of information. And hopefully that's going to be very useful. So, I mean, do you have any idea for the future? You've made this, you got to get it out. Like, what do you want this to do now that it's out there? What is your child going to do? How's it going to affect the world that's out there?
Well, we've still got a bit of, this is just the beginning, really. So this really is just the very beginning, because next year then hopefully it will get to its release, as in general release, so it's more available. But I mean, I know we're all quite passionate we did the feature version for festivals, but we'd love to now have the opportunity to do an episodic, so we can dig in and really expand and flesh out on stuff that we could only show a visual of, or so there's more that we'd love to do. So we have personal plans, and during the making of it, we talked about, wouldn't it be great if we could do a non-profit kind of branch off that was called Roots to Branches, and that we funded certain experts in certain fields going out to studios, or having classes that that's we're all quite passionate about that. So there's so much, and so this is going to be an ongoing I'd love a Netflix series. PR,
that would be wonderful.
If they could greenlight that would be great.
We've got the material.
We have we've got a lot of material, and we've got a lot of stuff that we'd love to expand on. We would have loved to have gone to Africa and India and New Orleans, and there's just it's endless. It's endless.
Wish list as big as your arm.
And I was this has to be 90. Let's try and get it to 90 minutes. Which is why it plays really well. I think personally.
No, it does.
But I think, we'd love that opportunity.
Okay.
That's the plan. And it will release internationally. It will be this one's just for America, but it's coming. So don't be patient, everyone.
Okay. No, that's a lot of information we got out. So that's great. And thank you for your time. Are there any last parting thoughts that you just want to say? Do you think it's important for people to know about in terms of what the documentary is, or what about jazz dance? Is there some little nugget maybe that somebody said to you, one sentence phrase where you just say, that nailed it? What can you offer?
I think that, go on. No, go on.
I would say, to quote, I can't remember Melanie George, be curious and attribute where this material comes from.
Do the research.
So once you finish watching the film, start reading some books.
Very good.
And this is to start a conversation. This is not saying, we're presenting as much as possible to get people curious and interested in having a conversation. So it's to be continued, ideally.
Oh, all right. I just thought of something that's put me in a whole different direction too. What about jazz music? I mean, because jazz dance is kind of always over here, and jazz music is over here, but originally they were together. is there interest from the jazz music world to say, boy, I really want to work with dancers. I want to put something together with them. You know, why are these two worlds a little bit kind of on their own tracks?
I think Wynton Marsalis was trying to do a lot
Yeah, I
at
was just
Lincoln
gonna say,
Center. Yeah, and bring it back. And I think, again, I think it comes down to funding. You know, why there needs to be that kind of opportunities there to pay everyone and allow these things to happen in these spaces. You know, we've got lots of theaters, we've got lots of opera houses and things. Why can't they bring in a jazz dance orchestra and a jazz dance company to work together? But I think a lot of it is always down to funding and things like that. But there's, for sure, it can happen. We've got the you know, the way to make it happen. We just need, I guess, the money and the opportunity. But we have everybody that
one of the best things I saw live in New York was at City Center, and I think it was called A Bed and a Chair, and it only had like 4 dancers and 4 singers, Parker S choreographed, but it was the Wynton Marsalis Orchestra, and it was just exquisite. It was absolutely beautiful. And that's we need more of that. And again, in the episodic, we actually tried to get Wynton and we tried to get Quincy to do like a music section, and we just couldn't make it happen, sadly, with schedules and finances and, you know, everyone on a different continent. But in the episodic, we'd love to do a whole section on that. I think it's important.
Yeah, I think that it takes somebody with vision, and it takes somebody with some resources and a voice that people will listen to. And I'll just say this as an example. Years ago, when I was a professor at University of California, Irvine, and my mentor there, who's on the faculty, was Donald McHale. Now, Donald is a very big person in the world of dance, and when Donald speaks, people listen. He put together a project between our dance department and the music department, where we choreographed to Duke Ellington's composition, The River, right? Which originally, I think, was choreographed by Alvin Ailey. And so from the music department, there was the orchestra, which was probably 60 pieces, and there was the jazz ensemble, which is probably another 15 to 20 pieces. We had all of those in the pit, and then Donald assigned each of us as faculty members, you'll do this one, you'll do this section, you'll do this section, you'll do this. So some were in ballet, some were in modern. I actually chose tap dance, which people looked at me like, how are you going to do tap? It was fabulous. I'm saying to make the dance and the music come together, it took Donald McHale with his gravitas to come in and just say, look, this is what we're doing, find the money, put it together. And then there was this major project, which I've never seen anything like that anywhere or heard of anything. The scope of it, to have nearly 100 people playing in the pit and have all these different choreographers of different genres come together. And then he was so clever because for the finale, he himself took sections of what everyone did, all the different choreographers, and pieced those together himself to wind it in to what the conclusion was. And it was really an unbelievable thing. So more people like that, like that.
I think it's no coincidence that Canada with Holojazz and DJD all work with live musicians, and they seem to have a better funding structure in place than we have in the UK or in the US. So it's you can see the dividends pay off with the wonderful work that they're doing. It pays itself in multiple ways. So
Great. All right, guys. Thank you so much for your time, and for getting this word out.
Thank you.
Thank
so
you.
Good to see you.
And for allowing me to be a part of what this presentation is going to be. So we're looking forward to the premiere on Sunday.
Yay! Thank you very much.
PM. And once this is completed, because people can still watch this, I'll be able to put those links in the description, and then I can put them in as a little card at the top, and I'm sure that this will get a lot of traction afterwards. Okay.
Fantastic.
All right.
Great. Thank you so much.
Hang in for a second. I'm going to pull you out and put you back in the green room. And
back in the green room.
Here you go. Okay. All right. Wow. What a great conversation. So that was about Uprooted, the journey of jazz dance. And it's a new jazz dance documentary film coming out this Sunday for American audiences through Dance Camera Film Festival in Lincoln Center. and it's be released in a wider distribution in months and a little past that to come. So, but that was a great, well-needed chunk of information about jazz dance, and hopefully we will get people to understand where it came from, what its value is, and what the possibilities are for the future. Okay, so thanks for watching. And again, my name is Bob Boross. This is my Jazz and Tap Dance Life. If you like something like this interview, please click subscribe, click the notifications bell, and click like so that YouTube knows this is good information to people to have in the future. Okay, thank you for watching, and we'll be back again next week on next Tuesday. I have an interview with Daryl Clark about using modern dance in musical theater dance training. So that'll be the next time we're back. Okay. All right. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you soon.